Okay, Martin Glenn, the FA Chief Executive, is to leave at the end of this season. Now, there's been some good side of his tenure and some really bad. I'll put the Rooney Rule as a neutral because there's a 3-year programme for it, and he's going to leave before the 3 years is up, so we can assess how positive that's been for getting minority groups involved in coaching and management and other forms of behind the scenes work and administration within the game. So I put the Rooney Rule in neutral, but basically it's more of a good thing than bad. He's willing to experiment in improving participation in minority groups. So, but it's neutral because we're waiting to see the full data. On the good side of things, the England's women's team have reached the World Cup semis. The men's team, World Cup semis. The under-17s and under-20s win World Cups. FA profits are up, nets down, but that's more to do with the Premier League, with Tottenham renting the stadium, and a lot more events taking place at Wembley than necessarily Martin Glenn having any direct involvement. And the winter break again is more of the football league and the Premier League saying we want to win a break, we need it, and leading the way rather than the FA taking the lead. But those that have also happened under his watch. The Rooney Rule I've mentioned. The negatives is what we're going to focus on because I've done a lot of videos on Sam Allardyce, Mark Sampson, and the attempts to sell Wembley. I know a fair bit about these various negatives. The Sam Allardyce scandal. Sam Allardyce replaced Roy Hodgson. Now, Roy Hodgson was a carryover from the previous chief executive, so we can't put Roy Hodgson on Martin Glenn and the failures of the England team at the 2014 World Cup and the 2016 Euros, because there were structures in place and agreements made before Martin Glenn took over in 2014. So we have to accept that. But you replaced Roy Hodgson with Sam Allardyce. People were questioning that decision. They were. It was like Roy Bassett, England manager. That's what people were comparing it to. He only had one game in charge. What then happened is the Daily Telegraph had uncovered a scandal within football where people were trying to avoid transfer rules and tax law and a few other employment laws as well were trying to be circumvented. And Sam Allardyce was caught up in a newspaper sting that the footage of that ended up on Sky News, BBC and all the international 24-hour news networks. And in the end, Sam Allardyce had to go. Martin Glenn was the guy who hired him. Now, we don't know exactly when this footage was filmed. It could have been filmed while Sam Allardyce was still a manager at a football club. It could have been filmed several years ago. What we do know is Martin Glenn may have had knowledge of that undercover investigation by the Daily Telegraph into one of the FA's employees, being the England manager. That scandal was pretty damning, but it's led to Gareth Southgate and success at the men's in the men's national side. Partly because Gareth Southgate's worked with youth. This is why the youth system is so good. This is a sign that the English Football League clubs and Premier League clubs need to play their youth more. Stop relying on foreign talent and stop importing foreign youth into youth academies, yeah? Football clubs, pay attention. The Mark Sampson scandal, I think, is what's most damaging in this period, which also links into the comments about banter. And I know a little bit about banter and how inappropriate it can be, but Mark Sampson was accused of racism by Eni Aluko and partly by Drew Spence, although Drew Spence didn't really have that much input into the parliamentary inquiry or into any interviews about the scandal. It was mostly Eni Aluko taking the lead. He's a very strong character. There's debates out there. People are accusing her of having sour grapes for being dropped from the team. And to be fair, her form at international level was fading at this point. So she was on the downswing of her career, but she claims that she was the target of racist jokes. Mark Sampson had been warned about his sense of humour. Now, I like stand-up comedians who are risque, as I should say. I like having a sense of humour. Jokes will offend people, but that's why humour's funny, because it's not meant to be taken seriously. Even if it's an offensive joke, it's not meant to be taken seriously unless that person actually is known to be supporting a far right or far left group, which may have not the tolerance for certain ethnic or social groups. But for the most part, Mark Sampson was already under review for his way he was dealing face to face with players. Parliamentary inquiry found that there were flaws within the FA and the reporting process if you felt you were being bullied. Now, we can agree or disagree about Eni Aluko and was she racially abused or not, because that's not what got Mark Sampson fired. There was something far more serious that got Mark Sampson fired. Yeah, more serious. The parliamentary inquiry, though, did find that the FA had structural problems when reporting cases of bullying, or if a player, a coach, or administrator had an issue, anyone within the FA organisation, even at club level, to go to a safeguarding officer. The parliamentary inquiry found that Martin Glenn and the structures he had in place were not fit for purpose, and he was aware of these issues. What got Mark Sampson actually sacked wasn't Eni Aluko. It came out a week later. They had another game. They won it 6-1. This is the night before he got sacked, and all the players celebrated with him. I think he knew the writing was on the wall. And there were mixed race and black players in that squad. So Enyoluko's claims of racism are possibly somewhat flawed. Two very strong personalities may not get on, but that's what people believe. Mark Sampson got fired because he had a relationship with a player at Bristol. That became public knowledge, hence why he got sacked at Bristol Academy. Yes, Bristol Women's team, when it was functioning under that name, which has since changed name. He had an affair with one of his players, one of the senior squads, so there was nothing illegal done. And Bristol found out, and they relieved him of his coaching duties, and also transferred the player out. But he was then out of a job for a brief time. Hope Powell gets sacked and resigns or steps down from the England women's role after like 20 odd years in charge, and Mark Sampson applies for the England job. But Bristol, as part of the background check, had a dossier on about why they had let him go from his role with the club. And Martin Glenn read that file and didn't take it seriously and said, no, he's still perfect for the job, even with a safeguarding issue. That's what led to Mark Sampson actually being forced out of the England role with the women's team, which then led to the comments about banter. Enyoluko said she felt uncomfortable about Mark Sampson's jokes being possibly of racist nature. And then Martin Glenn comes out and says, well, women's banter is different to men's banter. Women can't take banter as well. You know, I've been in a few locker rooms, a few dressing rooms in my time, and there's been some banter in there. Yeah, of that there is no doubt. I think it's probably worse at school and college than at senior level, when you're teenagers and you're learning your boundaries of what is and isn't acceptable as a person. There was some pretty risque stuff said at youth level when I was at school, playing school level rugby, cricket, football, and hockey. There was some more possibly pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable. But I will agree there is banter, and sometimes it can be inappropriate. I don't know what women's banter's like, but from what I have seen from women down pubs, in the workplace, at college, sometimes they can be vicious. Probably more vicious than men. I'm not lying about that. Women can be absolutely vicious. When they want to target someone or discuss something that's inappropriate, they can go for it. So if Enyoluko felt she was being singled out with a sense of humour, women can do that really viciously. They can be very, very nasty. If they don't like someone in that locker room or they don't like someone in the opposition's team, they will go for them. I've seen it in all walks of life, but I don't know what it's like to be inside a women's locker room. I really don't. I have not a clue. I wouldn't know. I'm a man. I've never played mixed sports, so like mixed tennis or mixed badminton. I've never played that, so I couldn't actually tell you what it's like inside a women's locker room or with women in a locker room. I couldn't. But those comments about Anna were very ill-timed because they came hot on the back of the parliamentary inquiry, and then he's come out and said, well, women can't take banter the same as men during that same parliamentary inquiry. So he's not necessarily the brightest cookie, the nicest cookie in the tin. Comparing the Star of David to the Nasty Swastika is another thing he said, which is really inappropriate at a time of really heightened tensions between certain religious groups, not only just in this country but around Europe. We've seen anti-Semitic and anti-Islamic and anti-Sikh and Hindu, and we've seen sectarianism between Catholic and Protestant. We've seen various religious groups or denominations of churches or synagogues or mosques or whatever it may be, and whatever religious group targeted. And religious hatred is just as bad as open racism. To compare the Star of David to a nasty swastika is absolutely moronic. And I don't think it got much press coverage at the time, but it happened recently. This has all happened. All these have happened in the last 2 years. So the first half of his tenure, things are fine. Since the end of 2016, things haven't been fine with Martin Glenn. He's been making a lot of statements and doing a lot of actions that aren't really appropriate. But the big one, I think, what's actually causing him now to walk after such a short spell of time in charge of as chief executive is the attempt to sell Wembley and the failure to sell Wembley. The fact that the FA profits are up, the fact that Tottenham are renting the stadium and paying the FA a large sum of cash because they're a wealthy club, the attempt to sell Wembley and its failure, and Sahih Khan's withdrawing of the bid under corruption cloud, and the fact that it became so divisive because their PR machine at the EFA wasn't selling it to the fans and other investors in the sport. It was not selling the sale well. We weren't even aware that the FA put it up for sale, considering yet in January this year they had agreed a payment plan on restructuring the outstanding payments on the stadium. They haven't even fully paid off the stadium yet. They've got a 7-year plan in place. So 3-4 months before the club, well, before Sahih Khan proposed a bid to buy the stadium, the FA had agreed a debt restructuring plan with the creditors for the stadium. They haven't paid. So the attempt to sell Wembley was initially off on a bad foot, and then they were undervaluing the value of the stadium. They wanted to sell it for 600 million when it cost over 800 million to build. So they were going to make a loss. And if I look at London property prices in the last 11 years, I do believe they have skyrocketed to 3 times as much as what they were. So what he was he was behind the plan to attempt to sell the stadium for less than half its value in real terms. That's even before the payments to the creditors were finalised. People are going to remember that, and then it didn't really feel right. Had they agreed to sell the stadium at full price, I would have had less of an issue with it. I still would have had concerns, considering that there was debt outstanding. The fact that they were making profits and debts were down anyway, and were being properly restructured well before they attempted to sell Wembley, because they had Tottenham in town. They had the NFL going there up to 4 times a year. They've had Rugby League play the Challenge Cup final there every year, and they have a long-standing contract with that. We have internationals, friendlies, did the playoffs. Wembley's hosted, Champions League finals. Wembley's going to be hosting Euro 2020 semi-final and finals. So the FA is already making a lot of money out of Wembley Stadium. They're starting to actually now turn a profit on Wembley Stadium. The club Wembley does need restructuring, but they host a lot of events there now. Wembley is now an all year round, 24/7 stadium. Whereas before, when it was initially opened, it was England games, playoffs, and one NFL game a year. It's now becoming a more used venue, so it's making more money. We've had boxing there. We've had music events there. We've had the race of champions in the old cars on the fake track there. Wembley's been used for more than just football. So the attempt to sell it was really bizarre, considering they're now making a lot of money off Wembley. And that was really badly handled. The PR machine at the FA didn't work, and there were a lot of concerns within the FA Board of Governors and people involved in the game. Fans were never on board. And those fans that were on board with the sale don't like Wembley. Wembley is a flawed stadium, I will agree. It doesn't have the same character as the old stadium. Transport links aren't great. There are issues with it being, a poor design interiorly. The way it's laid out, the atmosphere is always a bit flat. We've seen at England games the paper aeroplanes just being thrown around. The fact that this is outweighing all the good that's happened, and most of that good stuff has actually happened in the last 2 years as well. But the structures in place for the women and men's and youth sides have actually been there before Martin Glenn took over. He just had to take credit for it because it's now bearing fruit. The winter break was more of the football clubs taking the lead than the FA. The Premier League has an involvement with Wembley because Tottenham are having to rent the stadium. The Rooney Rule was them going to the NFL for help rather than Martin Glenn coming up with a similar FA employment rule. And all this scandal, mostly in the last 2 years, has overshadowed some of the good work Martin Glenn had done in the first 2 years. But there we go, Martin Glenn is to leave the FA at the end of the season. Here's a look back at primarily the last 2 years of his time in charge. We won't find out how successful this Rooney Rule for hiring coaches has been until another year or two down the line, and he's out of the job by then. So whoever comes in after him to replace has to say if this is worthwhile continuing as a project or not. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Very controversial last 2 years for Martin Glenn. I think that's basically what's caused the FA Board of Governors to go, we have lack of faith in you. We know he's stepping down. I think he's stepping down because of a lot of controversy and the PR disaster that it has been. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Place your comments below, and I'll have some more videos for you soon.